will not repeat my introduction there, but as far as the outline goes, we'll start with some perspectives. I'm going to start with a little bit about what DevSecOps is, and what it is in an ideal world, and what it is in reality. And then how that relates to Drupal. And ultimately, the components break down to awareness, configuration, and community. And then I'm going to throw in some other stuff at the end. And by the way, feel free to stop me or raise your hand if you have any questions or comments along the way. This is definitely a two-way discussion here, I hope. So a little bit about my perspective. Just for full disclosure, I am not a Drupal developer. I have stood up some basic test websites for various reasons, but I've never actually built a production Drupal website. I work with the Drupal developers at NCEI to help them secure their websites, to help analyze their code and analyze their configurations, and make sure that what we put out in production is as secure and low risk as possible. And we try to work, this is always an evolving process, but we try to work in an agile manner, and we're starting to see more integration between our development teams and our security team and our operations teams. We do have restrictions we have to work within. I'll talk about that a little bit more later, but we are seeing a kind of a trend towards an agile environment, which is a good thing, especially in a federal government context. My background is in security and web development and system administration. I came up as a PHP developer. I've done a lot of WordPress websites. I know that's a taboo word around here. But I have done a lot of system administration, Linux, and various other flavors of Unix. And for the past 4 or 5 years, I've been doing security primarily, application security in particular. From the federal perspective, the federal government tends to be slow to adopt new technology. They tend to be resistant to cloud-based services. Anything that's not within the federal boundary of a particular system or part of the government is kind of hard to acquire, hard to get integrated, or hard to purchase, or hard to make use of. We are bound by a robust risk management framework. You may have heard of NIST, NIST. It's the National Institutes for Science. I forgot what it stands for. But they come out with a risk management framework that a lot of federal agencies or pretty much every federal agency is supposed to comply with. And based on your risk level of your particular agency, you may or may not have the same rules as other agencies. And if your organization is more at risk for various reasons, whether or not you're a data center like we are, or you deal a lot with like personal information, you may have a higher risk level, which means inevitably you have more rules to try and work within. So we're trying to embrace open source more and more. That's a trend across the federal government. At NCEI, that is true as well. And something I've kind of noticed is that in a lot of ways, the way we have to operate is very similar to the way that a small design shop or even a freelance developer might have to operate, because you don't have a big budget, you don't have a big staff, and you have a lot of constraints that you have to reckon with. So there are a lot of similarities there, and that's going to be kind of a recurring theme here as I go on. Any questions so far? So I want to start with a bird's eye view. This is an actual bird's eye view here. If you haven't seen this, it's pretty cool. It's on YouTube, but it's a video of a hawk swooping down at about 170 miles an hour, and it goes down and lands on the guy's arm. It's over the city of Dubai. You can check that out if you download my slides later. I highly recommend it. But starting with the bird's eye view of things, we have DevOps and we have SecOps. And these are DevOps in particular you've probably heard of. It's basically the encouragement of an agile relationship between developers and the system administrators of an organization. And the goal is to merge the people and processes and all of the tools so that you don't have such a distinct delineation between roles, but to better be agile and productive and adapting to change and providing better services, you're able to integrate these processes and people and tools as business units. So there's also a newer, more recent trend called SecOps, which is a similar concept. You're integrating the relationships between your IT operations staff and your IT security staff. A lot of times developers or other people in the organization might consider those all the same people. They're all IT people, but those often tend to be very distinct relationships or very distinct roles in an organization, as they should be in a lot of ways. But there are ways to share accountability and processes and tools even amongst those two types of roles. And the commitment there is for uptime and service, smooth service, and also without sacrificing security. So buzzword plus buzzword equals a longer buzzword, DevSecOps. The goal here is to achieve greater efficiency and productivity through team collaboration with security baked in. So it's taking both of those other two concepts and merging them, so you have one big one. The shift is from security being the last thing that you think about in a project into being the first thing you think about in a project. And you want to integrate security early and integrate it often. And in order to do that, you have to kind of make everyone responsible for security. And the emphasis is on being proactive instead of reactive. So security early, security often, proactive. You still need to have some reactive security measures in place, disaster recovery plans and things like that. But overall, the emphasis for DevSecOps is proactivity. So in an ideal DevSecOps world, and this is taken from the DevSecOps manifesto at devsecops.org. You should check that out sometime. Similar to the Agile manifesto, I think that's kind of where we got the idea, but I'm not going to go through each and every one of these, but in general, you can see some of the ideas here and principles: leaning in, data security, and science over fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Being open and contributing with collaboration. Consumable security services with APIs over throwing hardware problems and whatnot. Red and blue team exploit testing, proactive security monitoring, shared threat intelligence, and compliance operations. So a lot of that sounds really awesome and really cool, but in an ideal world, we would all have that and all have the budgets and teams for implementing such concepts. But in reality, how many of you have your own personal red team or your own 24/7 monitoring system built into place? Probably not many of you, I would venture to guess. So what we have to do is we have to think about where we can apply what we can apply. So again, integrating security early and often rather than at the end, and making it everyone's responsibility, from developers, administrators, content authors, even SEOs and designers, everyone. And you may wonder, what would a content author, for example, really need to know that much about security? Well, if they're logging into your Drupal website and they're updating content, and even though they may have a limited role with few permissions to do something, they still have a responsibility to safeguard that account. They have a responsibility to understand, how to recognize a phishing email, for example. These are simple security concepts that do and should start up at the front end of the spectrum, so that you are reducing your risk profile all across that spectrum in all the places that you can. So security is a holistic concept. And the general principle here that I like to remind everyone is you really do need to take little bits and pieces of risk and try to reduce them. And the overall goal is to reduce that risk profile. Does that make sense to everybody? Any questions so far? No? Okay. So you may be wondering, how does this apply to Drupal? And that was a good question. That's why I'm here. So the three ways that I am proposing are kind of asserting that this applies to Drupal and to you as developers, as business owners, whatever the case may be. And that is awareness. I don't know if any of you were in Mark Shropshire's presentation this morning, but this was a key concept there. Get to know the risks and the threats and the ways to mitigate them for what you do. If you are a developer and you are building Drupal websites, well, you need to understand what your risks are, where they're coming from, and why they matter to you. If you are a content author, a similar concept. If you're a business owner, absolutely, you need to understand your risks as well. And those are going to be different depending on what your role is and what your job is. But as far as Drupal goes, you also need to understand what makes Drupal a target and what can be done to make that target smaller. In the security world, there is absolutely no way to eliminate completely any risk unless you take your website completely offline, then it's not a risk anymore. But we can't do that, so you just need to make your website less attractive to potential attackers than others. And there becomes a responsibility with raising the awareness of your users and your clients in all of the above concepts. And I encourage people to learn your own risks and your own risk profile for what you do, but also to share that with others as you can, especially your clients or your management or your coworkers. Configuration. Simply put, how is your website configured? How is your web server configured? How are you ensuring that those configurations are secure and that they are not changing over time as technology changes, as patches come out, as new versions of things come out? Are you going back and making sure that permissions haven't changed on your various user profiles or your users of your website, for example? And then community. The Drupal community, as I think probably everyone here is aware, is very mature and has a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience that it brings to the table. And it's important for people to leverage that community and leverage that knowledge in order to help reduce risk. I'm going to go into a little bit more about each of these three concepts. So, awareness. What are the threats? There's a ton of them. You probably see things in the news about malware and ransomware and data breaches. It's all over the place all the time these days. But you need to think about, what does that mean to you and your website? And what are your risks at, someone hacked your website and found all of the user accounts in your Drupal site. What risk does that pose to you? What information will be exposed? What responsibility do you have to inform the people whose accounts were hacked? Was there personally identifiable information in there? Was there anything that would put you at any kind of legal risk? Concepts that, as a Drupal developer, as a website owner, you should be thinking about and being aware of. Some technical awareness for the developers. I don't know if you've heard of the OWASP project, but it is the Open Web Application Security Project. It's an open source collaboration between a lot of security leaders in the security industry, organizations. A lot of people have put a lot of time into developing this OWASP Top 10 list, which is actually just now getting updated for the first time in a few years. I think they update it every 3 or 4 years, but the new one's about to come out any day now. And these are the items on the list. The general concepts here are, this is related to application security in particular, website applications, such as Drupal. But this does apply to everything, most web applications, not just Drupal. So the concepts of like injection, SQL injection, XML, external entities injection, operating systems, etc. That's basically when attackers can inject commands into an interpreter of some sort and get them to execute something that they shouldn't. That can be in the goal to take over a website or deface the website or steal credentials and whatnot. Speaking of credentials, broken authentication and session management is another one of the top 10 list items. This is typically when you have not configured your website to log people in correctly, and someone is able to take advantage of stealing a password or some session cookies or something like that, some keys perhaps, and they're able to log in as you. Cross-site scripting. This is a very common occurrence whenever we see Drupal security advisories come out. Often it's related to cross-site scripting attacks. One of the most prevalent attacks across websites in particular, especially where JavaScript is present. But this basically, the concept is someone is able to leverage insecure JavaScript to display something on a website that shouldn't be there. And that can either be a permanent storage of something that is displayed or something that occurs by someone manipulating a link to your website and injecting some malicious code in that link. And then when they get someone to click that link, it shows up on your webpage. And that can be as little as just showing a message to someone that is, taunting them, for example, or it could be as bad as stealing someone's cookies or worse. Broken access control, and as this relates to Drupal in particular, you may have people that log into your website to update content or approve, editors that approve stuff other people have submitted. Access control needs to be defined, and if you've taken good care, then one person will not be able to do something they're not supposed to be able to do. So that's what broken access control is referring to. Overall security misconfiguration, anything from the web server to the Drupal installation, sensitive data exposure. Have you left a database full of user identification, perhaps names and addresses and social security numbers, exposed somehow accidentally? Insufficient attack protection. Typically that's referring to brute force attacks against your website. Someone trying to run a script against your login page, for example, and you don't have sufficient mechanisms to prevent that from happening. And eventually they're able to guess a password and log in. Cross-site request forgery. Essentially this is when you're able to take advantage of someone who is logged into a website. Like, let's say you're a Drupal administrator and you've been working on a website, and you get an email from your friend, and you pop over into another tab and open up that email, and it's like, hey, check out this new code I found on this other site. You click that link, and because you were busy and you were rushing and you weren't paying attention, you didn't realize that was a forged email. It wasn't actually from your friend, and that the link you just clicked actually was crafted to have your browser execute something on your website that you were logged into that you were not intending to happen. Maybe that was to elevate someone else's account to be an administrator, or maybe that was to, well, it could be anything really, depending on what the vulnerability is. But cross-site request forgery is a common attack and something to be aware of. Well, I'll go back to that in a minute, but using components with known vulnerabilities, this has been something that's kind of come up a lot for me lately. At work in particular, where I work, we have people that will come in and develop applications over the years, and sometimes they'll get left for a while. And, someone will move on to another project, or they'll retire or something, but their application lives on. Those are a risk because the components in those applications, maybe a JavaScript library or a Java file of some sort, has become outdated and has known vulnerabilities over time, but no one's updated it in the application. And then lastly, new to this list this year is underprotected APIs. People rolling out APIs on the websites and not really thinking about what they do or what could be done with them that they did not intend to to have been done. But that is a new one that is, I'm glad it's made it to this list. But you may be saying to yourselves, okay, great, but what can I do all about all this today? Well, that's a good question. So we're going to talk a little bit about configuration pitfalls and avoiding the crocodiles and scorpions. So as far as some just general Drupal security configuration, a concept that's good to use in Drupal or any kind of application design is the concept of least privilege. So only give someone the minimum amount of access necessary to do the job. And that actually goes across all of software and IT in general. It's a good concept to keep in mind. General best practices: put CAPTCHAs on your web forms. Use SSL by default. It's possible to get a free SSL certificate from Let's Encrypt these days, so there's no reason not to. Even other reasons as well to use SSL. Google search results and whatnot are preferring SSL websites, and I recently read that a future version of Google Chrome is going to start showing an even more dire message in the address bar if your website's not encrypted with an SSL certificate. And it's good to see that as a general concept. More and more people are converting their websites to SSL, even if it's not needing to protect private information. It's just a good thing for privacy in general. Excuse me?
Google has also said they're actually giving priority to SSL websites.
Yeah, I've heard that too. I knew that was coming. I don't know if it had actually rolled out yet, but SSL-enabled websites are getting priority in the search engine rankings. That is one of the factors they're incorporating into their algorithm. Remove modules and themes that you don't need. Update is one of the biggest things you can do to keep your website secure. Update your modules, update your Drupal core, subscribe to Drupal security advisories, get them in your email, put them on your RSS feeds, whatever you need to do to make sure you know when things are coming out. The Drupal security team releases advisories every Wednesday, so you can kind of prepare for those, and I think they usually happen about 3 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. Drupal core advisories come out every third Wednesday of the month, if there are any. Those are much more rare than Contrib module advisories are. There are some security modules that you can use and add to your website to help enhance various aspects of security for the configuration. Paranoia is one that will scan your Drupal site and look for instances where PHP has been enabled and will block that in the web interface. You obviously don't want people injecting PHP into your web page if you don't know, you haven't reviewed it, for example. Login security, limit login attempts. This goes back to that OWASP top 10 insufficient attack protection. Login security will help prevent brute force attempts. You can deny logins by IP address. You can lock people out if they've failed to enter a username and password correctly 5 times, for example, and then disable their IP address for 10 minutes or an hour. Usually that's enough to thwart the automated attacks against your website. Password policies, enforcing strong passwords. That's pretty crucial. You don't want people using the same password more than once. If they have to change their password, you definitely want to enforce some amount of entropy in their passwords and minimum password lengths. Maybe even force them to change their password every 30 days, for example. Just kind of depends on how vigilant you want to be about it. Rename admin paths. This helps thwart automated scripts as well. And again, as far as these automated scripts go, this is something I see day in and day out at MCEI. We have a big monitor up in the office, and a real-time logging monitor that shows us all of the attacks that are coming in against our websites from all over the world 24/7. And it's pretty amazing how many people will just point scripts and hope they find something. And they're hitting us with WordPress attacks, they're hitting us with Drupal attacks, they're hitting us with all kinds of stuff. They're doing this against the whole government for the most part, and many, many businesses for that matter. And they're just hoping that something happens, something will hit, something will stick, and they'll alert them, and then they'll be like, oh, well, I'll check that out by hand later. And hopefully, if you've done your homework and your preparation, they will not be able to actually execute anything against your website. Security Review is a great plugin. This was discussed earlier this morning as well in one of the sessions. But it does a whole lot. It will go through your website, your Drupal site, and tell you a bunch of places you can configure things to be more secure. I won't go through each and every one of these, but there are a lot of them. I think Mark had gone through a lot of them this morning. So, security through community is the third concept here in the Drupal DevSecOps philosophy, and that is leveraging communities. Hello. I think the battery ran out. Hello? Can you hear me this way?
We'll still record the
Okay. Yeah, I think the battery died. I'll try to talk more loud. So Drupal core security is actually pretty darn good. Traditionally very secure. Traditionally, the Drupal security team is quick to respond, and they're very communicative. I mentioned the security advisories that they release. Does that one work? Hello. Awesome. I have a hard time projecting my voice for very long. It gives out on me, so this is good. Thank you. The Drupal security team is quick to respond and very communicative. I mentioned the Drupal security advisories. And they have a process in place, a very mature process for responsible disclosure. So if a vulnerability, let's say a security researcher finds a vulnerability in Drupal core, the team has a process in place for that vulnerability to be disclosed privately, securely, just with the security team. And then they will work with the developers to patch that, and then issue an update or a patch for Drupal core, and issue a security advisory to go along with that. Depending on the severity of that vulnerability, sometimes they'll even issue some news ahead of time. You've probably seen this in the past. You may remember Drupal getting from a couple of years ago, but the security team issued a statement, like a week ahead of time saying, we're going to be releasing a patch on Wednesday, and you really need to update as soon as you possibly can. I think in the case of Drupal Geddon, if you didn't patch your site within like 4 hours, they said you might as well just wipe it out just to be safe and start from scratch. But they are communicative and they are responsible in that regard. Where things kind of start to fall off the wheels a little bit as far as risk goes is with the Contrib modules. That's typically where most vulnerabilities are found. As I mentioned, most of the security advisories that come out from week to week have to do with Contrib modules, because this is where you get many more unknown factors, many more cooks in the kitchen, many more people contributing to projects, and that just introduces more places for things to happen, or code to get overlooked, or input validation to be forgotten, that sort of thing. So something I've worked with our developers on at NCEI is we've kind of developed a process and a procedure for selecting modules for use in a website, in a Drupal website, and some things to look out for when you're looking at modules that you might want to use, such as how long ago was it last updated? What's the level of activity like with people contributing to it? look through the bug queue for any open bugs that may be raising red flags. You know, if someone has said, hey, I think there's a security vulnerability in this module or something, you might want to know about that before you actually install it on your website. How many user installations does it actually have? If it's a module that, you know, 200 people have ever installed over the last 3 years, and it hasn't been updated in the last year and a half, well, that's going to be more risky than something that has, you know, tens of thousands of installations and is updated, you know, every month or so. What is the development status of the module? Is it stable? Is it a development module? Is it an alpha or beta or even a release candidate module? Those matter. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that in just a minute, but they matter because only stable modules are covered by the security advisory policy in Drupal. And only then, stable modules that have actually been applied for the security policy and been accepted. There's kind of a lag time in there between when a module becomes stable, when it applies for being part of the security process. So a stable module can actually be at risk of not being covered by that advisory policy. When a module is covered by the Drupal security advisory policy, it becomes wrapped in that responsible disclosure process that I described a minute ago. They get the benefit of the security team's help if a security vulnerability is found. The security team will work with developers to create a patch and make sure that it is patched sufficiently, and then the risk of unpatched, publicly known vulnerabilities is greatly reduced that way. So keep it in mind again that only the stable modules are covered by this policy, which means that all of those other types of, all those other different states of the module, alpha, beta, development, those don't get covered by this policy. So if someone files a bug on a beta module, for example, they found a cross-site scripting injection point in a module, for example. That's just going to sit in that bug queue for everyone to see. It's not going to get deleted. It's not going to get moved over to a private area for the security team to work on. So that is going to be sitting there until somebody fixes it. If it's an older module that has been sitting there for a while, that can be a big risk. Because that means that someone can find that and then start exploiting it on Drupal websites that are using that module. Any questions on that? Yes?
On the module status, right? And especially we have seen this issue with the Drupal lately, because not all the modules have recommended releases.
Right.
So, I mean, I work with a team where we have done more development with Drupal 7, but off lately we have started building properties with Drupal 8. But some of the modules, like, you know, the basic modules like LDAP, Memcache, so these modules are not, we don't have the recommended releases yet. So, I mean, for production environments, is it like a no to have those modules, or based on this, since they are not eligible at all for the security advisory?
Right. So I wouldn't want to give you a yes or no, like you should or should not be using a particular module. Again, you have to go back and evaluate the risk of that module using some of the criteria that I've outlined here. Our policy where I work is generally to only allow stable modules. If there are exceptions, the security team reviews them. We all go through them. We look at the types of characteristics that I described. We will have a whitelist of allowed non-stable modules for use. And that also means that there's some additional work that comes with it, because I will keep a list of those myself and go through that bug queue every week, every 2 weeks or so, and I have time to make sure nothing new has come open. No new vulnerabilities have been announced, for example. The other side of that is, a lot of times these modules are selected because they have a component that our developers want to use on the website, but there's a bunch of other stuff in the module that they don't even really need. So in that case, I'll suggest that developers will just pull out that code and create a custom module that way and discard the rest of it that they don't actually need. So in some cases we'll accept the module, in some cases we'll ask them to create a custom module based on that one, just fork the code and create something a little more secure. Or we might just have to say no, depending on the state of the module. Let's see here. So when you're looking through the Drupal website for modules, you may or may not be familiar with some of this, what it looks like. But in this module in particular, you can see the beta 3 version here compared to the 2.8 version. The 2.8 version has a shield. That's a stable release, and the shield means that it is protected by the security advisory policy, whereas the beta one is not. They've done a lot to change the design of this shield and these indicators over the last year or so, but I think they're getting better and better at raising people's awareness without seeming too scary about it, without being alarmists too much. At the top of a Contrib module project page, you'll see something like this. This project is not covered by Drupal's security advisory policy. If that is the case, keep an eye out for that. That little image has also changed a lot recently. It almost looks like a progress bar to me, so I'm not really sure what they're going for there, but it's obviously not made much progress. So I have never seen one that has progressed further than that little square there on the left. So maybe that'll change. I don't know.
I guess the next level is if they have the right now to pull a module if the provider does it, the module maintainer doesn't fix the security bug.
Right. They'll pull the modules, is that what you said?
Yeah, basically they'll pull the releases, so you can download the releases you can download from Git.
Right. I have yet to see that happen. Maybe that has occurred, but I haven't seen that yet. So a few other things of note here. Going back to that OWASP top 10 and the outdated components in applications. Bundled libraries are dangerous in modules because you don't know, unless you've gone through module code, you don't know what that module may be pulling in, such as an old version of jQuery, such as an old version of Bootstrap. jQuery 1 and 2.
There's actually a thread on end of life. Basically, Bootstrap 3.x is in maintenance mode. It's not end of life because they have not released 4.0 yet.
Right, but there's also a thread on GitHub that points where the developer says, I'm not doing anything with Bootstrap 3 anymore unless it's absolutely critical. He's not planning on going back to backport patches, and there's actually a known vulnerability that he says, I'm not going to apply that because it would be a breaking change. And the same is true of jQuery 1 and 2, actually. They have known vulnerabilities that will not be backported. The jQuery team is about to update their homepage to the download jQuery button is going to say versions 1 and 2 are no longer maintained. I have some recommended homework for you all. And you can report back to me next year. No. The secure coding best practices will be a whole other presentation, maybe for next year, I don't know yet. But that's something you should look into if you are doing any custom coding in Drupal modules, whatever. Make sure that you are aware of PHP coding practices. You're using the tools to make sure you're writing good code that's clean and secure. Go check your web host. Who are you sharing space with? There are tools out there that allow you to scan your web host's IP and find who your IP neighbors are. Who's sharing a server with you? Did you know that you're sharing a server with well, I don't know. I don't want to slander anybody, but with somebody nefarious on the internet, let me put it that way. Somebody running a gambling website illegally or something like that. Well, make sure you understand who you're sharing a space with. Are you doing backups of your website? And if so, have you ever tried to test how easily you can restore one? Is your web host providing backups? Have you asked them for one? Have you been able to restore it? Are you doing them yourself? Have you ever tested them? You need to be aware of those things in case somebody does hack your website and you do need to take it offline and restore it and fix what was wrong with it. Again, updates. When's the last time you updated your server software, or you checked that it was running a recent version, or that you have rebooted to apply a recent kernel update, for example? These kinds of things tend to get forgotten in a lot of environments, unfortunately, and they tend to get exploited when that happens. Are you keeping your Drupal site up to date, the core and the modules? If you're using the non-stable modules, are you going to check bug queues for anything security related? And do you subscribe to the Drupal security advisories? That's your homework. I have some resources here that are related to everything I've discussed today. And again, these slides will be available soon. But thanks, and I'd like to open it up for any questions or discussion.
Point out that looking at your watch, there's basically a report for pages not found. Is a good report to look at to see where people are hitting your site repeatedly for the wordperfect.exp.
Yeah.
The good thing to do with those is if you have control of like your Apache or Nginx front end, is to then take that and write rules.
Yep.
So where Apache just drops them. So therefore you don't have the overhead of Drupal trying to find that page and everything.
Yeah, and that can happen a lot with automated attacks.
Yeah, you can also do that kind of defense in depth by using you use Cloudflare.
Yep.
Cloudflare, since it's a firewall kind of web app firewall, has a lot of rules in it that'll strip out a lot of the WordPerfect, a lot of the different
WordPress attacks and whatnot.
WordPress attacks and Xauto discovery and stuff like that.
That's true. Yeah, that is definitely easy to implement some basic procedures and basic modules and configuration changes to thwart a whole lot of that automated stuff. I would definitely recommend doing that. And then you just need to think more about the manual attacks that you might be facing, and phishing, spear phishing, and that sort of thing.
Another potential gotcha, if you are using dev modules, and unfortunately Drupal 8 is not mature enough that you probably won't be able to do it without dev modules. Dev modules are not covered in the updates report in there, so you need to keep track of what are dev and keep those up to date manually.
Yeah. Well, hopefully I didn't scare everybody. I try not to be a fear monger, but being aware is key.
So beyond the Drupal modules like security, for security scan, do you also recommend or suggest external tools like checkmarks or web inspect or something like that?
So where I work, I do a little bit of code analysis, static code analysis. I do checking through Drupal security configurations and modules. I also do a certain amount of front-end penetration testing. We use WebInspect in particular. And I actually try to hack into our own stuff, which is my favorite part of my job. And sometimes I am able to, so. I will say that I have yet to actually hack into a Drupal website, but some of our other things,
I used to work for a company. We did meeting sites for a lot of Fortune 200 companies, and I'm happy to say a lot of their IT departments did security checks on those. Nobody ever broke in.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest risks for Drupal is not its inherent security or that it's poorly written or poorly coded or developed, but it's the end users. It's the developers that are in a rush and forget to do something, or it's the people that share passwords or that kind of thing. That's probably the large share of Drupal websites that do get hacked. I would venture to guess. I don't have any statistics to back that up, but that would be my guess. Anybody else? No? All right, thank you guys for coming.